I kind of begrudgingly respect just the dedication to not getting better at what you do for a living. Just coast through life.
It probably shouldn't even happen.
If you got it, you got to flaunt it, Acid.
You know what? I got a lot of stuff that I don't want to flaunt, and so I just keep it to myself.
Jeremy is really big into the used mattresses. That's an excellent deal.
He has a used mattress store on the side.
I'm not going to pull the pants down without the pants down cue.
And we found out that Anthony's friends are all 13-year-old boys. Nice.
Clay, how you doing?
Doing a little more poorly after that terrible introduction. I was just fine, to be honest with you.
Hello, Sci-Fi Gangsters. This is the show where we talk about science fiction, comic books, and video games, but really it's just an excuse for me to catch up with my friends and to meet interesting people. I'm Anthony Dennar, media scholar and person who will never play red light, green light ever again. I'll never do it. Not that I was doing it a lot, but I'm definitely not going to play the game again, right? Very dangerous game, red light, green light. That's what we're talking about today. We're talking about Squid Game, the hot, popular, international sensation Netflix series we'll be talking about that we'll be doing our Squid Game review. Of course, before we begin, you can always check us out on YouTube, and we're streaming on Twitch and all that good stuff. Also, you can check us out in podcast form on Spotify, Apple, all the places that you get your podcasts. If you don't want to look at our faces, you'd rather listen to us in audio format, you can most certainly do that. Like and subscribe and all that kind of good stuff. But let's go ahead and introduce our panel that we have here. First, let's say series regular. Let's say show regular. Lindsay, how you doing?
I'm good. Still working over at the vet office, and God, people get crazy sometimes.
From what I understand about people with their animals, people love their animals and they act weird about their animals.
100%. I mean, sometimes it works in their favor, sometimes not so much. If you get really panicky about something really minor with your dog, and then you're not listening to what we're telling you, it doesn't tend to work out for anybody involved.
I see that being the case, yes.
Yeah.
But it's good to have you on, Lindsay. And then up next, we'll introduce the rest of our panel here. Bloomer for the win. We've had you on several times. Bloomer, it's great to have you back. How you doing?
I'm doing really well. Always a pleasure to come back. I love hanging out with you guys. Love chatting about all the different topics. Looking forward to today for sure. And anyone who hasn't had the pleasure of getting to watch one of the episodes that I was on before, I am one of those crazy pet owners that Lindsay was just talking about. So, when it comes to my dog Coco, all rational thought out the window, and it's just listen to me.
Very good. Of course, Bloomer, he loves his pets, and he owns all of the guitars. He owns all of them.
All of them, yeah.
He owns
every guitar.
Every guitar is just hanging in the background, or just whenever you just feel like jamming out. Who knows?
You never know. You never know.
Maybe you're in the mood for an acoustic. Maybe you're in the mood for an electric, but you're set.
Yeah.
You're definitely set, but definitely good to have you back on, Bloomer. And of course, recently promoted to producer of the show, a well-deserved promotion. Acidtrain. Acid, how you doing?
I'm good. Just want to flex a little bit here, just
Sure.
for the promotion. Triple the pay, can't complain. And apparently I won't get shot in this job. I guess we'll talk about that later, though. But doing well.
Well, very good. Definitely good to have you back. Acid, last week I had to do it all by myself, and of course, we ended up just uploading onto Spotify as a podcast form. Didn't want to really mess with the video format because I don't know much about that. So definitely appreciate your role on this show, Acid. You're such an important part of Sci-Fi Gangsters. All right, very good. So once again,
now that you've gotten your contractual obligation out of the way. Yeah.
That was kind of weird, right? It was like I was reading off a script.
It's like,
right.
And you are very important to us.
Very good. Excellent. All right. So once again, we're talking about Squid Game. So if you're a big fan of the show, if you haven't seen the show, then, spoilers are ahead. But first, we catch up first. That's what we do on this show. We catch up with our friends. The whole point, when I started this show, I said I wanted to use this show as an excuse to meet new people and to catch up with my friends, and that's what we're going to do right now. So for me, what's new with me? Recently, obviously, I'm working on my prospectus, but I'm teaching a lot of classes. One of the classes that I'm teaching that I'm really enjoying is my From Comics to Screen class, where we talk about comic book movie adaptation. Whole lot of fun. And most recently, we watched The Joker because I wanted to talk about the representation of disability, right? And the Joker is a way that we can have sort of like this conversation about how disability is often depicted in comic books. So, of course, I've seen The Joker countless times because I've written a couple papers on the film. And I decided to go ahead and watch it again for this class so we could talk about it. And I've come to the conclusion that it's not a good film. Like, I think I've settled on that. I think that's my official, and it has nothing to do with I'm not saying it's bad performances, because it's not. I'm not saying it was poorly directed, and that's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying, like, the message of the film is just not good. Like, it's not a good depiction of disability, for one thing, but also a lot of the narratives with the gun is definitely problematic in a lot of areas. So we're having a discussion in class. Definitely interesting conversations from students. The funny thing about it is, out of all the conversations that we had about many of the films that we've watched, The Joker definitely generates the most conversation in the classroom. People want to talk about it. They want to talk about sort of like, Joaquin Phoenix's performance, but they also want to talk about some of the more, controversial moments in the film. And once again, I have no problem with, I'm not one of those people that says like, oh, it's just gun violence. No, I'm talking about how the gun is the center of his empowerment. And I feel like that's actually a very problematic message in the film. And obviously it's depicting disability in a very negative way as well. Sort of like the negative stereotype of the disabled person being dangerous. And the Joker definitely perpetuates that. So we were talking about the Joker in class the other day. Once again, great discussion. So, and then of course, the next class we're talking about, because we had a whole section on representation. So we talked about the representation of race. We talked about representation of gender, sexuality, and then disability. And now we're moving on to pure adaptation theory. So we'll be watching Scott Pilgrim versus the World, right? And talking about remediation, a term that's very popular in the digital media world. But we'll be talking about that. So that's one thing. Bloomer, what's your opinion on the Joker?
Oh gosh, after that whole in-depth analysis, I'm like, yeah, I remember watching it. It was pretty cool. Yeah, like, I mean, oh no, this is putting me on the spot. No, I think a lot of what you said was interesting to hear from that perspective. I feel like I have to rewatch it almost with that in my mind, because I don't have a strong opinion. I don't want to come off as too ridiculous here when I say this, but because I get where you're coming from, and I feel like I probably, if I rewatched it, I would see a lot more of those keys and those major points that you're pointing out. But on the flip side, in my head, I'm like, I still remember the Joker from when I read comic books when I was, knee high. And it's funny, I guess it's just because mental health wasn't such a conversation back then. So I never really put it in that frame of mind, I suppose. I just look at, the Joker's, he's the bad guy. He's the classic arch villain to Batman. Like, and this is his interesting story that showed how he got there. And yeah, you could tell there was a few things going on upstairs probably throughout the movie. And, I think, like I said, it would be interesting to rewatch with what you actually said in the back of my mind going on, because again, I don't think I looked at it that in-depthly.
Yeah, maybe I want to take 2 steps back, because this is something that I mentioned in my class as well. I completely understand if you read the Joker as sort of like this embracing who you really truly are, right? So as sort of like this, so embracing your disability and being okay with that, and sort of resisting how the world wants you to behave, and sort of resisting and causing a revolution. And if you see that as empowering, more power to you. I could definitely see those narratives in the film as well. So it's not simply a bad film in terms of completely regressive narratives. I can definitely see how you, as a potential audience member, goes, you know what? I see the Joker as someone who's marginalized, and he's finally embracing who he really is, and sort of resisting those sort of like the oppressive society. I definitely read those messages as well.
Yeah,
So
I said, I feel like I need to go back. Like now I'm like, where do I stand on this? Like, let me go back and watch it.
I have quite literally gone back and forth. Like I said, I've written two papers on this. The thing about the Joker that fascinates me, and I'm perhaps going to write another paper. There's a potential conference that I think I'm going to present this paper to. The thing that fascinates me about the Joker, and this will be the last thing I say because we've been talking way too much about this. The thing that fascinates me about the Joker is how you can have drastically different fan communities who embrace the Joker. So you can have sort of like these marginalized people who feel like they don't fit in with society, and they see the Joker as sort of embracing who they truly are. But then also you have these white, male, angry dudes, incel culture kind of things. And it's fascinating how you can have those drastically different fan communities embrace the Joker. And why is that? What is it about the Joker? There's my research question for you. What is it about the character of the Joker that lends itself to these drastically different interpretations?
And that's the unfortunate, like my unfortunate experience with the Joker. Like as a movie by itself, if I could like completely separate it from culture, it's an interesting movie to watch. It would not be like anywhere in like my favorite films because of the various things that, issues that it does have. But the release of the Joker for me is so intertwined with like incel culture and the introduction of that and how they reacted to it when it came out and before it even fully came out, when it was still like in review stage, that I cannot like the movie because when I watch the movie, every time I watch it, that's the only thing I think of because it became such like a stamp on the movie for months. And so it's just this like really twisted thing. I want to like it because Batman's one of my favorite characters, and I think Joker is a fantastic villain for all of the weirdness of Joker, but I can't like the movie.
Yeah, and once again, this is way too much conversation about the Joker, but I 100% agree with you, but that's the thing, and Lindsay, you know this, you can't separate the film from culture. You can't. Mm-hmm. As much as we want to, you can't ignore that. And the fact that Todd Phillips is the director? Yeah, I think so. Todd Phillips, he often rants about cancel culture. And that just knowing that he rants about cancel culture and then has a film about this, it doesn't gel well.
See, I gotta tell you, like just to counterpoint everything here, what's great is for me, I'm not really a social media guy. It's ironic because I stream on Twitch. I do some YouTube from time to time, but I don't follow Twitter. I don't follow Instagram. I don't keep up to. I couldn't have told you in a million years who was the director. I would have been like, I don't know. Who's the director even? Like I that out of things. Like I do not pay attention. Yeah, like Spielberg. He does everything. Like that's where I'm at. So I never had even truthfully heard that there was like this incel culture within the Joker. So that's actually news to me. And I mean I know about the incel culture, not a big fan, but I'm just saying like I would never have even in my head put those two together. So that never took away from my enjoyment of the movie. Which is, it's so interesting to hear you saying that, Lindsay, when you're like, oh, I can't separate it. And I totally can understand that as soon as you've been presented that, it's in your face and like you see it and you just go, oh my God, I see this so over and over. But because I had never had that exposure to it, just because whatever it was, I guess I didn't browse Reddit during that time or, you know what I mean? Like I just never had the exposure to it. And I never even would have put that together on my own.
Yeah, there's definitely some good points. And, as when I always tell my students, if they defend the movie and everything, I'm like, that's great. That's fine. I don't want to say that you're wrong. Right. It's just that these are the things that I'm picking up on. And perhaps we can have a conversation about it. Right. Mm-hmm. Fantastic. There you go. That's our Joker conversation. And so once again, I've written 2 papers on the Joker and I'm probably going to write a third. So let's go ahead and move on to Lindsay. Lindsay, what's new?
Not much really. It's just been me trying to keep up desperately with like what TV is going on, even though there's like not a lot of TV going on. It also seems like all the things that I watch is going on at the same time. And so like there's been a bunch of seasons finales, which is also very weird because this is 100% pandemic product because season finales are not supposed to be happening in October. And so like I've been surprised by every single one of them. And then very mad about I don't know if you watch Titans at all, but Titans
Don't say anything. Don't say anything. I'm currently watching it.
Well, have you watched part of season 3 at the very least?
No, I have not.
Let me just say, like, it's not spoil, I promise. But like Jason Todd is one of my favorite characters.
Yeah, I realize that he becomes the Red Hood. That's already
But the thing about it, let me do my mini rant here.
Go for it.
The thing about it is Jason Todd in the comic books is kind of known as the asshole Robin. That's his thing. But when he becomes Red Hood, there's some more intricacies that get thrown onto him, and he becomes more interesting, at least for me. And it feels like with Titans, they just took the asshole Robin and ran with it. And that's like the only thing. That's his defining characteristic throughout his entire existence on this show. And for a lot of people that are not comic book fans that read the comic books, this is one of their first exposures to Jason Todd. So them experiencing Jason Todd as just this asshole is so depressing to me, because it's like there's a lot more going on. And so I feel like there's going to be a lot of people that could potentially be fans of Jason Todd. However, he just will turn them off so fast because of his run on the show that they're never going to want to go like read anything about him or like learn more about him. And so it's really this like heartbreaking thing to me of like one of my favorite characters is finally getting screen time and they're just messing him up so bad. Not anything against the actor. The actor's doing good. All the actors on that show are doing the best they can. It's just, I think some of the writing choices that they're making to create the specific universe that they're building with Titans. In some ways it's that like the shorter season runtimes you have with HBO, but also the downside of like the obsessive need for nitty gritty realism all the time. When you're talking about comic books, even the nitty gritty quote realistic comic books do comic book shit sometimes, and they're not allowing themselves to do that in the shows. And so it's just, I'm a Bat Family person. I like all of the like Robins and everything, and Titans, I don't think I'm going to make it to season 4 because they're messing it all up.
Yeah, so I've been watching Titans with Linda, and she's been surprisingly enjoying the show, but the show is very graphic. So I can't watch it with my kids, right? Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of F words in it too, like a lot, like way more than necessary in a lot of ways. Like at some point, like it feels like a high school performance. Like just like we're going to say F word all the time just to make it seem awesome and hip.
That's the joy of like, it started off as a streaming show and then it's still kind of a streaming show with it being on HBO. So I feel like with the DC universe, whatever their streaming was before they got like shifted over to HBO, they were trying to like pull off some HBO premiere channel type things. And
yeah,
you just know from like, you know, or the old stereotype at the very least is all your premiere channels, everything that's behind a paywall is going to be full of nudity and full of cuss words all the time. And that's what makes people attracted to it, supposedly. Part of the reason why they butchered the last season of Game of Thrones, but we're not going to go there.
That's all I was thinking this whole time while you're talking about the bad writing. I'm like, welcome to the Game of Thrones world, you know, season 6, season 7. Haha.
Yeah, okay. And just as another thing, side rant, can we just appreciate that we know that they messed up Game of Thrones so bad that it went from one of like the most popular shows and they just dropped the trailer for the spinoff and nobody has talked about it. Like they dropped the trailer and nobody cares. Like all the Game of Thrones fans don't want to like even try anymore. So like prediction for the future, first couple of episodes will get some traction just out of curiosity. It's not going to go anywhere because they've burned too many people too bad.
Yeah, and I've read most of the books. I actually stopped reading it because I became frustrated with George R.R. Martin. Like I became frustrated with his writing style. Like I just didn't. I don't want to say he's overrated because he's not. He's a talented writer, but he plays with his audiences way too much for my liking.
You
Like
can
he
tell
messes
as
with us too much.
you can tell as the books go on that he gets more and more pompous about his, like he knows he's getting more and more popular. And like that's why we're never gonna get a like final books. He's gonna die before the last books come out, and somebody's just gonna have to like put all of his stuff together and like ghostwrite it and publish it.
Yeah, 100%. He's done writing. He's a man who likes to drink, smoke, and he has a lot of money. You know what I mean? Like when every Monday morning when the rest of us wake up, so does he 3 hours later, and he slips into a nice comfortable robe before sipping on his whatever he's drinking for the day. I don't think there's a lot of time in his world where he's like, you know what? I'm going to put in a solid 12-hour day today. I'm guessing, you know?
I agree with that. All right, Bloomer, we'll move on to you. What's new?
Oh my goodness, what isn't new? Just life is so wild. No, I'm kidding.
Oh,
There's nothing. I'm in Canada. There's nothing that happens here. Right now, this is both the most embarrassing thing to admit, but also kind of awesome, is I've just started to rewatch The OC. If any of you saw The OC, thank you, Lindsay, for laughing along with me. That show is so, like, okay, I watched it when I was probably, a teenager, what you're meant to be when you're watching it. And it was like, oh, this is like drama and this is good stuff. I'm watching now and it holds up absolutely as drama, but it's like the cheesiest, most obviously written, like they imply something like, oh, this might happen. And you're like, oh, foreshadow. And then like the next scene, the actor or actress is literally saying like, this is what you should have gathered from the last scene. And it's just like, oh man, this is kind of rough. It's amazing. Don't get me wrong. Strong recommend. Anyone who hasn't seen it, like, go watch this. It is fantastic, but it's also terrible, like absolutely god awful. And I'm loving every minute of it right now.
Fantastic. Catching up on the OC. I don't think I've seen a single episode of this. So here's a trivia question, or not trivia question, but here's a question. Is the OC the one with that famous scene where it's like, ooh, what you say, where someone gets shot in the back? Or is that a different?
So, oh man, I'm trying to remember. I'll be honest. Like, so OC has like the theme song, that song California by, I blank on who it's by right now, but it's just like the whole California, and it's just like, it's so good. The theme, that alone brings me back to the show that I'm like, all right, this is worth my time. It's kind of like almost Buffy the Vampire Slayer for me. Same sort of vibe, that it's like campy, it's cheesy, you know what you're getting. You're not exactly going to be, but it was great. It's so good. Like Buffy was years ahead of its time. If it came out in the vampire craze, that show would have been even 10 times more popular. And it was still really popular. But the OC is along the same vein of like, that audience, just a lot more dramatic, and it's all about Orange County, this super rich area in California, and like the crazy dramatic lives they all live. And it's terrible, and I love it, and I strong recommend it. Absolutely.
It's like the fiction, like CW type version of like the Hills, like reality show that used to.
Exactly.
Like peak early 2000s.
Yeah, totally. But it's great. And like I said, I never actually watched all the seasons before. I think I watched the first 2, maybe even the 3rd. I don't remember. So as I'm rewatching it, I'm kind of like, okay, I sort of remember what happens. Ooh, did this happen? Is this like a figment of my? So anyways, it's been good. And I'm only a few episodes in. I think I'm on episode 5 or something now. And oh man, I'm just loving it. Like that's probably when we're done here, I'm like back to the OC.
Well, very good. So Bloomer recommends the OC. Acid, what's new with you?
Not a lot. Everybody's watching all these old shows. I actually picked up Seinfeld again.
Okay.
How are you finding that holds up?
Early Seinfeld is stupid.
That's like, okay.
So I'm still in season 1.
So
like later on, how the format was, Jerry's intro, he'd have his stand-up thing, and then it would go into the show, and then it would be the show, and then it would be over.
Yeah.
Well, season 1, it's Jerry doing stand-up, a little bit of the show, Jerry doing more stand-up, a little bit more of the show, Jerry doing more like the format was the dumbest thing I've ever seen. Like the storylines are, I mean, they're about nothing, so they still hold up. But some of them are just the way technology is now, like all that technology, all those stories, like phones and the stuff that like all that's just like, oh yeah, I remember payphones. That's I remember those.
It's the reason I was asking is because of the fact that when I was young, I remember it was the show that my dad watched. And I was like, this is stupid. I don't get it. Then I watched it when I was like 18, 19, and I thought it was hilarious. I was like, this show is genius. I can't believe I didn't understand it when I was young. Then I tried to rewatch it at some point during the whole pandemic, like maybe a year and a half ago or something now. I watched like 3 episodes. I was like, this is terrible. Like, this is awful. I couldn't watch it.
It's so bad.
I stopped.
None of them, like I've never watched Seinfeld from start to finish as far as the whole series is concerned. Like, because my parents watched it, you know, kind of like my parents watched it. They loved it. It was funny for them. I'd watch it every once in a while. But from what I can remember, they don't age at all during the entire, 14, 15 seasons, however many seasons it is. Like, none of them. Like, not a gray hair. They may have gained a little more weight, but they did not age at all. They still sound the same. They still have the same laughs. They still have the same stupid joke. Like, it's just, and it's not a bad show. It's just, it's not a good one.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
There's certain bands that I listen to that I like listened to in the 90s. I was like, oh man, these guys hold up. They're so good. And then there's bands that I listen to and I go, how did I ever listen to this and think this is good?
Yeah.
And that's kind of where I'm at with Seinfeld. And maybe if I watched more, I'd change my opinion. But right now I was like, I couldn't.
Like certain Seinfeld episodes work like, you know, kind of like the musicians back in the day that had like the one-hit wonders, right?
Yeah.
That are still good. Like, there are episodes of Seinfeld that are absolutely hilarious, but they're 1 in a million. You know, it's like, oh, that was a great episode. Like, you know, like the episode where they all are like fighting, or not fighting, but just like contemplating and nagging each other about how to eat a candy bar. Like, that was a funny episode. Like, one of them eats it with a fork and a knife, and the other one eats it just straight up. I mean, it was a great episode. But yeah, so that's all that's new with me. Seinfeld.
Well, very good. So we have Bloomer catching up on OC, Lindsay's hating on the Titans, and Acid hates Seinfeld. So there you go. We wrapped up. Oh, and I hate the Joker, apparently. So
it turns out television and pop culture is a lot more important to all of us than I ever realized. Because that's like, what's new? Well, this is what I'm watching.
Well, honestly, I've been trying to find a place where I can watch Buffy again, because I loved that.
Yeah,
I can't find it anywhere.
It's tough, actually.
It used to be on Netflix, and
I have a friend who told me there's a way I could watch it. We'll talk later.
Oh, okay.
Well, there you go. Excellent.
This episode is sponsored by NordVPN.
There you go. So let's go ahead and start our little review of the Squid Game, right? So this is how we're going to do this. This is how we're going to organize this particular discussion. We'll pick one thing. So we'll have a total of 3 things that we want to talk about, right? So we'll pick the 3 things. It could be 3 things that you liked, 3 things you didn't like. Maybe you can kind of mix and match. And then you can kind of talk a little bit. If anyone wants to sort of add on to it, you can. So that's how we'll organize it. So I'll go ahead and begin with my review of the Squid Games. All right. So this show I really enjoyed. I really, really enjoyed. And of course, you could point to the violence, you could point to the games and all that kind of stuff. But what I really enjoyed, because I'm always a big fan of this, is the social commentary. I thought it was a great way of sort of discussing sort of like the way that certain people are pushed to a certain degree to where it's all or nothing. Like, they don't have anything left. So where they have to, I mean, you can kind of make the analogy of the lottery, or like going all in because you have nothing else to do. You have nothing else to lose. So you might as well risk your life to win a game. And it also has a lot to, like, we can have conversations about gamification and we could talk about ludification if we want to as well. So gamification is the theory that our culture is becoming far more gamified, but usually with gamification, it's usually like industrial forces that are forcing us to do this through, but by trying to increase profits. So it's an exploitive way of increasing profits is by making it a game. I mean, of course, we can all point to how these elements are, in our everyday lives. From my son who comes home every day with and I can look in his app and I can see his score that he got from school, which is a thing, right? My son gets a score every day for how he behaved in school, right? So, I mean, our whole culture itself has been gamified. And yes, we can sort of pinpoint the industrial forces and everything. But I would argue, as someone who uses play theory in a lot of my study, is that we want things to be gamified. Like, it's not necessarily something that's forced upon us, but we want to. We want it. We want to have fun. And that's why ludification is such a better term in terms of like how everything is becoming more playful in terms of how we communicate with each other is more playful through memes and retweets and that sort of thing. Like social media is far more playful. How we interact with politics is far more playful. Like it shows. So this really is sort of like a case study in like sort of the ludification of culture. And we can have larger conversations about, the class system, and we could talk about, the rich exploiting the poor, and how, obviously the Honest Trailers joke that I thought was pretty funny is that this is essentially the combination of Parasite and Fortnite. That's essentially what this is in a lot of ways. And of course, Parasite has been praised for its social commentary as well. I would argue that in Parasite, the parasite is American culture or America's influence on Korea. That's always been my argument when it comes to what is the parasite in Parasite. But anyways, moving on. So obviously we can have larger conversations about sort of gamification in our culture, ludification, in ways that are far more interesting. So I'll go ahead and stop. I'll start with there. That would be my number one. Okay,
Nice.
well, those are good. There you go.
Not to be confused with ludicrusification.
Yeah, that's. I'm like, how
different.
can I get away with typing in these words to dictionary.com real quick? Just really while we're doing this.
Ludification. R-U-D-I. Okay. Anyways. All right. So very good. All right. So let's go ahead and go to Lindsay. What's one thing you want to talk about?
Why you gotta call on me next while I'm still PC? Because you forget I'm the one that like studied all the exact same shit you did.
Yep.
So I'm still like trying to parse together my.
Would you let me go to Bloomer first and give you a chance to think?
No, because then I'm just going to end up arguing, and then it's just going to all be about your point. No, I think for me, one of the interesting things, and this is, I guess, leaning back into my horror focus when I was in grad school, is there's something really unique. And I think it's the reason that a lot of people have like attached, there's like, I think 2 main reasons, but one of the main reasons that people have attached to the show is the use of the children's games. And there is something really interesting about taking a children's game and turning it horrific. Because that's essentially what they do. Everything except for kind of the glass bridge. I don't think the glass bridge is 100% based on any children's game.
Is it? That's a good question. Yeah, I can't think of
because they explain all of the children's game like rules for all of the other ones except for the glass bridge. But maybe like hopscotch or something. Closest I could think of.
Quick side note before you go, Lindsay. Why didn't they just jump on the edges where the thing was of the glass? You land on the edges where the rail is, and you're not going to break the glass because you're putting the pressure on the rails. Go ahead, Lindsay.
Because that doesn't make good content, Anthony.
That's true. Very true.
But there's something interesting about this, like, horrifying turn in these games that I think is part of the reason people get really attracted to the show. Because when you think through like horror theory, one of the many types of monsters or explanations for why something turns horrific is when you take something that's supposed to be innocent and good, and it's secretly evil. So think of like, the Antichrist or something like that, that's supposed to be this innocent little baby, and it's really this like ultra powerful demon that's going to end the world.
Anytime there's any like children in a horror movie, you're instantly just like, oh, you're the scary one. Yeah, you're the weird one. I can tell. Or like children's dolls and stuff like that are terrifying. Terrifying in movies.
Part of the argument for why children in particular are scary is because it's they are inherently here to replace you. They are inherently here for you to die. Once you have a child, guess what? You're no longer needed. Your generations and your bloodline is continuing.
As a father, I can I can vouch for that.
So there's something horrifying about children, but there's something even more of like almost like a potential corruption of your memories and stuff. Of like I played red light, green light when I was a kid, and to think back to it as like with this in the back of my mind now, it fundamentally alters that memory in some ways of like this could be really sketchy. And then of course there's also some interest as well of it being both a fundamentally uniting thing and a fundamentally dividing thing. Of this just shows like pretty much everybody has some version of these games, maybe not these exact games and these exact rules, but something similar enough that you can compare. And yet it is being used to brutally murder and mutilate people and turn people against each other. So this thing that around the world, everybody knows how to play these things or can learn within 3 minutes is also just turning. And so it's this really, there's going to be like 5 million papers about it, I'm sure, in like media journals within the next like 2 years about the horrifying nature of children's games being used in this manner.
It's kind of like Survivor, only instead of on the island, you're inside the island. You know, it's basically what it is.
Yeah, very good. I agree with that assessment, Lindsay. It reminds me of the concept of the unheimlich or the uncanny, something that is familiar but eerily not familiar, right? This is what Freud talks about, and we could use psychoanalysis to talk about the use of children games.
God, I hate analysis Freud so much.
Oh yeah, me too, 100%. I'm tired of Freud. And once again, I'll say it. For the longest time, I've always said this, for the longest time, I never understood if I was just never smart enough to understand psychoanalysis, or it's just doesn't make any sense. And I've come to the conclusion that it just doesn't make any sense. All right, so we'll go ahead and go to Bloomer. What's one thing that you enjoyed or didn't enjoy about the Squid Game?
So I'll be honest, there's a lot, and like my thought process kind of branches really quickly on this. There's so many broad topics I do want to kind of talk about because I haven't really talked much about the Squid Games with people. So all my thoughts, I'd love to get them out. But to try and narrow it down a little, let me start by saying I really enjoyed the show on the whole. I actually found it super entertaining. I want to talk with the subs versus dubs with everyone if we get a chance as well, because that's to me, I mean, I know I touched base on it with you, Anthony, prior, and I think, because we have different experiences with it, I think we can discuss that for sure. But I'd like to, before that, I just want to comment on the fact that it kind of, even though I understand that there's people from like whatever, and they're just thrown in this really crazy situation, and they didn't really know how to react to it. One of the things I always thought was kind of strange about it is that they end up making groups, right? And they'd be like, we're going to battle against these guys at night, and we're going to try and eliminate them, and this, that, the other thing. Did no one realize that it never said only one person can win? So as many people as around were possible. And think about it. There were multiple games that they had where it was a 50% elimination rate. So look at like the marbles game. Look at, what was another one that was the 50%? Oh gosh, I'm blanking right now.
Tug of War.
Tug of War. Thank you. That's exactly right, Lindsay. So these games where if you have more people around, you have more shields, your percentage of surviving goes up. So there was a lot of times where I was like, I don't understand, even though maybe, it brings up the money just a little bit, but at some point maybe it's because they're greedy, whatever, they didn't think it through. But at some point, the amount of money you were going to earn, no matter what, was going to eliminate your problems. You were going to be in a good spot. So as opposed to being like, hey, now let me slit my neighbor's throat in order to get, an extra, whatever it was, how many million Korean dollars it was that we all did the conversion, right? It was like $80,000 or something American per ref. So instead of getting that extra 80,000, realizing that that's a person that ups my percentage of living through the next game by, insert 5% here or whatever. How did no one think this through? I mean, it made no sense to me that why are they all trying to kill each other? Be friendly for a minute, guys.
There's
That
actually
makes
some
content,
person.
Bloomer.
There's actually some person on YouTube. I forget who. I just randomly came across the video the other day and watched like half of it. That did the math. That was like, here's how many people could have survived, and everybody still would have had more than enough money, and it would have like upped your percentage. Because like in the like glass bridge or something, he started doing calculations and stuff of like percentage, like rate of survival, and it was like something like 3,000, 30,000, something like that.
Yeah.
And it's like if people had actually thought through it and did exactly what you were talking about, then it would have been by the end something like 20, 30 people could have like survived, had more than enough money each, and like their rate of survival would be like 1 in like 400 or 500 rather than like 1 in 3,000.
Yeah.
And it's just,
I'm glad that was where you went with this. I was so worried because I'm not really a math person. Surprise, guys. Is that I was like, oh God, if Lindsay tells me why I'm wrong here, I'm going to look so stupid. But no, I'm glad. That's because that's what I thought. I was like, mathematically speaking, it was in your better interest to keep people alive. It's like in a reality show, you don't want to vote off your like the strongest competitor always, because a lot of the time they're your shield. You keep like you're just behind them. It's like the glass bridge one. You've got someone ahead of you still. Like, go ahead. I think it's the left one. Go ahead, try it out. Oh, see, told ya. Try left again.
I think that's a great question. If I can get a little bit deep here, I think one of the things that I found very interesting about the show is that whenever you're watching it, you're like, why aren't you guys just teaming up against this one a-hole? Like, clearly this guy is like disrupting the flow and making things dangerous when they don't need to be dangerous. Like, he's making them more dangerous. So why don't you just all gang up on him? Right. So you're kind of having these conversations in your head. But then I'm thinking to myself, isn't this kind of the point of the show, is to show how we as a society, not just in American culture, but like Western capitalistic culture, that we're constantly taught to be self-interested. We're constantly taught to be hyper individualistic, right? Where it's about my success has everything to do with how far I'm willing to step on others. And then that's what the Squid Game is, right? It's this idea that you're being forced to break up your alliances. I mean, the marble game is the perfect example of this, where they got tricked, right? When I was watching the show, I got tricked too. Like, I was like, oh crap, and I probably would have done the same thing if I was in the game. I would have picked, who knows? I picked like one of my best friends, and then now we're competing to kill each other. I mean, so I find it fascinating where it's sort of like this analogy of sort of neoliberalism, if we're going to use a big term, right? Of this idea of, rather than being community centered, which, we are hyper individualistic, where we're far more concerned with our own self-interest than we are of sort of protecting the herd, right? And a lot of that has to do with capitalism, right? It has to do with America's influence around the world, right? So Korea is a great example of the United States influence in an Eastern country, which usually has more of a community mindset, and how the United States' influence of hyper-individualism is sort of tainted. I mean, we're getting a little bit deeper here in my interpretation, but I mean, that's what I think, in my opinion, that's what Parasite is about. But so once again, I think this has a lot to do with, Lindsay, don't give me that face. This has a lot to do with, you give me that face that a lot of my students give me, and that is, you're reading way too much of this. But I think
this is me disagreeing with you.
Oh, yeah, go ahead, please tell me.
Because there is a need to talk about American influence in South Korea beyond a doubt, and Western influence on the East beyond a doubt, because that's where the type of capitalism that gets inserted into it is a Western concept for the most part. However, this show is 100% a critique of South Korean capitalism.
Okay,
which
fair
is
enough.
actually very different in a lot of ways than American capitalism. So there is a touch of it because of just capitalism around the world functioning at the very base level the same. But there's some details that they throw in that are really unique to South Korea that become really important for why things pan out the way they do.
Yeah, fair enough. I can buy that. I buy that argument 100%. Fantastic. All right, good. All right, so where are we at?
Acid.
Okay, so now, Acid, we're moving on to you. What's one thing that you enjoyed about or didn't enjoy about Squid Game?
Okay, so I'm going to keep this simple. I went in to this show. In the back of my mind, I thought, this is a show. And it is created for my entertainment and nothing else, right? I'm just going to look at it like that. Y'all have dug so many holes into whatever you're digging them into, and I'm not going to step in one of them. So
fair enough. Hey, this is what we're trained to do, Acid.
I know. Y'all are overthinking way too much. I'm like, dude, it's a show. It's entertainment. Let's enjoy it.
At the end of the day, you're
we
100% right, though, Acid, that like every time it's like, but wait, why would they have done this? Well, because that's how it creates content, Bloomer. Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
it does.
Like,
It creates
you have to
content.
understand,
That's right.
I'm not very good at creating content on my own, Acid, so it's
Me
hard
either.
for me to recognize it, you know?
Which is
So-
why I'm still on my 10-year stretch to becoming a Twitch partner. Yeah,
Yeah.
It's gonna happen one day. I've got like 5 years to go.
Yeah, any day now. It's going to
any
just
day
flip
now.
the switch.
Yep. So this is what I wanted. I needed a few more episodes, just because I kind of wanted either a backstory or some more information on the VIPs. I mean, all there was just these VIPs. are
Season
coming.
2, my friend. Season
And I'm
2.
just like, who are these guys? Why are these guys here? Where is their money coming from? Why do I care about these people? Like, I get that they were there and that they were funding all this and that it was for their entertainment. But I'm like, okay, well, that's great. Who are you? You know, like, why do I give a rip about who you are? So I needed more information. Like even one episode, like a VIP episode, just to kind of give me all right, well, this guy owns this business, or this guy's a political guy, this guy's, just kind of give me who in the world are you? So
Yeah, because what's the reason behind this whole funding, this massive
Yeah.
secret hidden island with
where are you getting all
billions
your
of dollars?
money
They have
from?
how many people working for them? They just the costume budget alone to buy all those masks.
Right. I know.
Like,
And they've got to
that's-
be pure gold, right? Laced with little
clearly.
diamond inserts. Yeah.
But for them to be
All this
funding this whole thing, like this is a lot of money. So how come? Are they making money back somehow through
Yeah.
the betting
Where's
system?
where's the return?
Like, yeah, there's
Where's
got to
the
be.
return?
You don't get to be that rich by throwing your money away. You just don't.
Like, I want it to be like,
Once you're that rich, you can throw your money away and you don't expect it to come back, though. I think that's part of the point.
I
Like,
mean,
as a-
maybe, but I got to tell you, I've never heard a billionaire say, you know what, guys, that's enough. Thank you.
you're right.
Like, I got to be honest. I forget, was it, oh man, I forget who it was, but the one guy on like Dragon's Den or Shark Tank or whatever, he said he's like the 5th or the 10th richest guy on the planet. And sometimes he's sitting there by himself and he thinks there's 9 people richer than me. And he gets like angry about that. So, I mean, I don't know. You're right. I'm sure. Listen, if I have $20 to my name, I'm going out to McDonald's. So like, I mean, I am not the one to not throw my money away, but it's a different personality type. If you're that sort of rich, like they want to see that number go up. So in theory, I would imagine they have to have some sort of return on this.
Now, I did notice they were betting on stuff.
Yeah.
I got the gambling part.
And maybe that's all it is.
And I mean, who knows? Maybe when each of the contestants signed away their right, maybe they left the insurance policies on themselves to these gentlemen.
I mean, it's a fetishization of power. Like it's this idea of I'm powerful and I can do this and I can control human people, and just being able to, get off essentially, right? On that.
I mean, and it showed because they were all very arrogant and very
They were using
disrespectful even to
humans
each
as
other.
furniture.
Yeah, using humans as furniture. I mean, it was very I am the king and you will obey me. Of course, they can't all be the king. So, I guess whoever won the bet became king for a day or so. I don't know, whatever it was.
King.
So, yeah. So, I guess, my main first point would be give me more info on the VIPs.
Yeah, it was funny because I was watching the show. You're about 3 episodes in, and you're thinking to yourself, like, you're trying to think about it logically, and you're like, what's the point of the game? Like, what are the game masters getting from this? Mm-hmm. Because, obviously, you understand, like, the people who are taking the body parts, they're making a profit from the black market. But then you're like, well, they're not part of the game. So what, what's the point? And then you finally figure it out. Oh, okay, I get that the VIPs are funding all of this, and they're making money based on these rich people. All right, very good. All right, whose turn is it?
Yours.
That was everybody.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Oh, thank you.
To you.
I've been debating what I want to do for my second one, so I'm going to go ahead and do this because I feel like I want to talk more about sort of like social commentary in the film, and that is I love how this tackles the myth of meritocracy. So if you're not familiar with with meritocracy as an ideology,
I'm not familiar with any of that, Anthony. Please explain it to us.
I will be happy to. All right. So the myth of meritocracy is this idea, and it's prevalent in American culture. It's prevalent in Western capitalistic culture. Is this idea that if you work hard enough, you're successful. If you're talented, you will become successful. And the more talented you are, the quicker you will rise to the top of the social hierarchy. And it has everything to do with how determined you are to get to the top. So if you're not successful, it's because you didn't work hard, right? That's the myth of the meritocracy. And of course, we can tear this thing apart and say, no, it has everything to do with where you were born. It has everything to do with your gender and your race and all the other socio-cultural factors that contribute to success in the United States. And we often, as Americans and Western culture and capitalist society, we often perpetuate this idea that if you are not successful, it's because you're lazy or you're not talented or you don't deserve to be successful. And really, that's not what contributes to your success in society. And Squid Game often depicts this as even the guy who's the game master is saying like, oh, this is a perfect so it's fair for everybody. It's equal for everybody. But even in the game, there's corruption, right? Mm-hmm. There's the guys on the side who are trying to sell body parts, so they're giving hints to one guy to win. The games are designed
bridge when he dimmed the lights at the end. I was like,
turn off the light. Oh,
you can't do
Acid,
that.
Thank you so much.
You just screwed up the game. Like they just manipulated it. Yeah.
It's such a fantastic analogy for the meritocracy myth, right? This idea that we're going to make a fair game where everybody's equal, and if you succeed, it's because you deserve to succeed. And there's so much corruption from allowing people to kill each other while everyone's sleeping to, all this other stuff that's going on the side, and the VIPs like kind of getting involved as well. I mean, it's just like, it's such a perfect case study for like the meritocracy myth in a Western capitalistic society. And it's a great way of sort of explaining this to, for example, if I wanted to include it in one of my classes where we watch Squid Game, we can have this conversation. But I definitely enjoy, there's so many assets. Thank you so much for bringing up the fact that he turns off. That's such a great example of someone succeeding on their own and then the system interfering in a way that, doesn't allow them to sort of game the system, right? So everyone's attempting to game the system, right? That's the whole point, right? And then the system itself saying no, right? It's just, it's a fantastic.
Because the guy was the glass maker or whatever, and he could tell the difference. So I mean, there was your advantage right there. Like everybody behind him was good to go. I mean, you could have all went to the next round after that.
And it's only like added to for me because like to me when I watch the show, it is essentially the whole game and the setup for like the people controlling it and everything. It is a like company. And so it's not even just meritocracy as like society. It's a company. You're hiring like entry level people who don't know what they're doing. And you're pitting them against each other to get further. and get higher. And then eventually those people end up becoming people like the game master who played, won, and is now trying to keep everybody under him going through the same stuff that he did. So like that's your like, you know, boss that you hate that's like, well, I had to go through this, so you are too, rather than saying, I had to go through this. I know this is messed up. Let me fix it. So that when you're coming through, everything works better. And so you just like, you keep going up and up and up. And like, even the guards and soldiers and stuff are like that middle management who are just there.
Which, by the way, I would love to know what the application process looked like for those PlayStation guys.
How do you
like, are you on like, you know, Indeed or in Google trying to find a job, and all of a sudden it's like looking for, you know, questionable PlayStation mask man who doesn't ask questions about their job and doesn't.
We all know you apply to Foot Locker first. And then once you become management of Foot Locker, you move on to the Squid Game. Oh, even the concept of the undercover boss, right? You had the main dude who was playing the game with everybody and heavily influencing the outcome of the game.
And he was so happy the whole time. He was like, I love this game.
Yeah.
And even kind of like when I was mentioning the South Korean, like the specifics, South Korea is very, very, very anti-union. And so that's part of what makes them like, we have anti-union. No, they have anti-union busters that go in and still like shoot people and like maim them and harm them, which is part of that flashback that we had from the main character. And you can think of like when they started busting up the groups that were starting to like, you know, hold their own and then were perfecting themselves and making things more difficult. Anti-union busting that's happening right now. And so it's just... yes, it's entertainment, but there is social commentary that's happening here.
Yeah, very good. Excellent. And once again, we're film scholars, so we're going to dissect this thing. All right, so Lindsay, your next, well, what's your next one you want to talk about here?
Well, I guess kind of a head nod to Bloomer here. There is something about dub versus sub that bothers me with this. Not only because the dub, the criminal lady has the most annoying dub voice I have ever heard. It is like cartoonishly bad, where she is kind of sympathetic and interesting when you watch like subs, and given more nuance and stuff when you watch subs, but then you watch the dubs and just the voice itself makes you hate her. It is so bad. I understand why the need for it is there, because there's some people that can't like really keep up with subs. I'm also one of the people that tends to watch like half of my stuff doing something else. And so I do need dubs on occasion so that I can like, you know, over here playing a game or cooking dinner or something and keep up with the show. But it is almost a show that is worth watching twice to get a dub version and a sub version, to get the differences and see what you miss.
Yeah, I did. I mean, I watched the dub version, and the first episode was painful just because I was like, well, at first, I'm like you, I was doing something else. I had it on this screen over here, and the only reason it even intrigued me is because I have like SNL that'll pop up on my YouTube feeds, and it was like Squid Game SNL, and I'm like, what is this? And I was just, because I'd never even heard of Squid Game before. And then I clicked on it and I went, what are they talking about? Like, what is this? And I saw that it was recent, and I'm like, okay. And I saw the description. It was on Netflix. I'm like, what is this? So I just hit play and just had it on the screen next to me. And I was, playing Hearthstone or something like that. And then I just kind of started looking over it. And by the time like the first episode was over, I was in my chair. Hearthstone had already auto logged out. And I'm sitting here watching this show going, this is not half bad, but it took a minute to get used to the dubs for sure.
And so me and Bloomer had this conversation before the show began, and I also watched the dubs, but I went in knowing that the dubs were going to be terrible. So I overlooked it. Like psychologically, like I overlooked the dubs as, yes, they're horrible performances. Like the dubs are terrible. in a lot of ways, and it really takes away from like the emotional depth of the characters and what they're dealing with. And there's this weird histrionics going on that just doesn't make any sense to what's happening in the show. But knowing that, I was far more focusing on the nonverbal performances of the actors and actresses. So I ignored it in a lot of ways. Obviously, I was listening to the narrative, but I was like, I knew it was going to be bad, so it didn't necessarily bother me as much.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead, Lindsay.
Well, I was about to say, it's like once you get into it and you get used to it, it's still okay. The woman's voice still annoyed the hell out of me.
Oh, no, it was bad. No, that was 100% bad. Oh, yeah.
But it is another thing of like, you do miss a lot of the really important bits that make understanding what's going on more nuanced. Because like with her thing, I think one of the dubbed version was the quote was, I can do everything except what I can, or something along those lines.
Yeah.
I think one of the actual like lines from the subbed version was talking about, well, I'm smart, I just didn't get to have education.
Oh.
And so, yeah, it completely changes her character. Rather than her just being like this over the top braggy all the time, like bold person, to I'm smart, but I just didn't get to have education, which now we know there's a backstory of she's an intelligent woman who may have been able to be like a bank broker or something, but didn't have the means to get there.
Yeah,
and that's not in the dubbed at all.
Yeah, I can't pretend that I know all the differences because I haven't like researched into it, but I've heard that a lot, that between the subbed and the dubbed, what happened a lot, there were a lot of mistranslations. So things that either didn't make sense or they left out key points, or just like, again, a lot of the subtle nuances. I went and I watched some of the dub, and what I'd recommend to you guys, if you did watch it dubbed and all the way through, put on like even part of an episode, find like one of your favorite scenes and go watch it with the sub. It changed drastically for me, because same thing, I was doing something else. I was doing some work at the time, so I wasn't watching the first episode like fully. So I just had it on, with the dubs, and I was like, okay, like their mouths don't really match up, but whatever, it's fine. Like, I don't care, I'm busy. So, but there were times where I was just like, it would catch me. I was like, oh, that's so awkward. Like, that doesn't sound at all like what you would, like, what? That's okay. Yeah. Like, because they just like, it would be like something that's supposed to be dark and dramatic. And it's like, hey guys. And it just like, what? Like, that doesn't fit the feel at all. So anyways, I watched 99% of it though in sub. And oh man, it was like, I was telling you before, Anthony, I took like a Sunday and I just like watched. I ended up being like, all right, enough work, put that to the side, let's just watch this. And I pretty much binge watched the whole thing. I think I left the last episode for the next day. Other than that, I mean, it was fantastic. Like, it was so much more dramatic. I was so much more into it. But I mean, I'm also a guy that with anime, if they've got it, I'll always choose to watch the subtitle version over a dub. Other than Fairy Tail, that's my one exception. But
with anime, you get burned too many times by the dub. You have to watch this.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. There's definitely several moments throughout the film when you're watching with the dub that it takes away from the emotional impact. Like, there's one particular scene that I'm thinking of when the husband ends up having to kill his wife, right? Because they're on the team together. And he says something to the point of, are you guys not human? Like, he says it like that. And you're like, ooh, yeah, like that's not a good performance. Like, but it's all the dub's performance. It's the voice actor that's doing it. And it just doesn't gel well with what's happening.
I swear it almost felt like with the parts I didn't watch the whole thing dubbed by any means, but the parts that I did just like check to see what it was like. I swear it was like they didn't give them any context. They just like literally, here's your lines, voice record them with like no like parentheses, like angry or anything like that. And they would just say the line the way they thought. And then they just like, okay, take it, put it in, we got it. And meanwhile, it was like, yeah, dramatic, upset moments. They're saying almost like happily, or like this is a moment where it could have been happy, but it was a little more just like almost like, I don't know, like broken up, choppy feeling.
Now, some of the VIPs spoke English at the end.
Yes.
So, yeah, I mean, I was watching the dub version, and I just happened to catch, like, oh, his mouth is matching his words. Like, I just happened to notice it. And So I mean, those were fun.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, fantastic, excellent. All right, so that gives me more credence in the fact that most of the
who are these
VIPs were white.
Who are they?
Anyways, all right. So, moving on to whose turn is it now? Bloomer, right? Bloomer.
Gosh.
What's your next one?
Well, I was gonna talk subs versus dubs, but because I think we just touched on that one, let's like spur of the moment here. Just like let's put a moral dilemma to each of you. The marble situation, tough one, right? What would have been your game of choice? What marbles game would you have played?
Out of the ones that we saw, or just in general?
No, it could be whatever. Don't forget, like literally, we saw it. It was just all the rule was, and this is kind of going to lead into my last topic. So, like, don't go too deep on this part. But is that there was always ways around what the game was. It's like it puts on like an even level. What's so interesting is how often it was like, hey, let's figure out a different way of doing this so that we can win. For example, the chisel out thing. Well, hey, I'm just going to lick the candy until it pops out. There was never like, you have to do it this way. It was just win the game or get through it.
To do it. Yeah.
So with the marbles thing, it was just you had to hold your partner's 10 marbles at the end. That's why we saw with the
and you couldn't
not
use
the
violence.
main character, but yeah, and you're right, without using violence.
Yeah.
So that's why we saw the main character's best friend there, Trick. Thank you. I'll trust your expertise on the names. I'll whoosh, But he tricked them. Plain and simple, he tricked them, and it was within the rules because there was no violence. But he never won a game. But what would you guys have done? Like, would you have tried to make like a fair marbles game? Would you try and be a little more thinking ahead? Would you just be like hey, let's do it all one shot, boom, let's talk for 30 minutes and like live my memory on? Like, what would you have done?
So I think this was constantly what I was thinking when I was watching these games. I was like, coming up with strategies of how I would handle the game. And the marble situation, it just felt like you just have to like pick somebody to die. Like it has to be a random selection because I mean, what do you're going to trick somebody? Obviously these people they don't really know each other. They're not like real friends, but it's just like one of those things where, at what point do you want to survive, and to what point do you want to like die with some sort of like honor or dignity? And like that's the debate that was happening, right? And the one dude, the best friend, he didn't care about tricking or honor or anything like that. He just wanted to flat out. Can we argue that he didn't really have any redeemable qualities? Did he have redeemable qualities? I guess at the very end he took his own life. That was sort of like the Darth Vader death ending, right? Of sort of like,
but he had some pretty negative qualities first. Like, let's be honest. I mean, going back to my first point, you didn't have to kill people off, and he tried to kill off his teammates. Like with the little candy one, like he figured out what the game was. He should have been like, guys, we all go for this one. It's the easiest one. We're the most likely to do it. Let's, as a team, let's just really take our time and be smart. Instead, he's like, I don't know. Why don't we all choose a different one? Who's going to take the umbrella? Like, that's a pretty negative. That's a bad best friend, let me tell you.
Yeah.
And then he actually ends up killing the girl. Like he stabs her in the neck. I mean,
yeah.
At a certain point, like, yeah. So obviously, you kind of have to ask yourself, like, how far would you be willing to go to win? And I think for me, like, I wouldn't go that far. Like I wouldn't, like, I would rather die with dignity than do all that other stuff.
Yeah. I'm kind of on the lines like with the two girls, just let's have a nice conversation. You go first and then whoever goes second either gets to try to live or just to, never mind. You can have it, just think about me. Think about me later. It's okay.
I agree with the one shot system. I wouldn't want to spend half an hour doing something like marbles. That'd be terrible.
And I do think it is how much you want to die and how you or how much you want to live or die and how much honor you want to die with should you die. But let's be real, like there were some people that knew each other. There was like the husband and wife that were paired up. And so it also is dependent on who you end up paired with, because it could be somebody that you actually know and have a deep connection with. It could be somebody that you're starting to form a deep connection with. Because I mean, the main character and the old man had a connection that was forming, a friendship that was based on a lie, but was forming, at least for the main character. So that makes things a little bit trickier. So like, no clue. It is so situational that I don't think I could give an answer.
That's fair. So, but we're going even more depth than I actually meant for this to go. Don't get me wrong. How trickery level, I'd love to tell you guys, like, from my own perspective, oh, I'd be so honorable. No, are you kidding me? I just saw the dude beside me get his brains blown out, and like, random person who I've known for 3 days, like, listen, you seem nice, but like, I want to live here. So I'm going to do everything in my power, I bet you. Like, again, I'd love to tell you guys, honorable, noble. But what I meant is, would you guys like play marbles? Would you do like acid, like the one shot? Like, let's just throw a ball. Who's closest to the wall is the winner. Like, that's what I would say. Just like more, I would do like a one shot, just be done. And then, but like, do like what the girls did, like take the half hour. Like, let's talk. Like, listen, one of us is done. One of our stories is over at this point. Like, let's help each other live on that way.
Yeah. But knowing that they, well, at least up until this point, knowing that they kept everybody on equal ground, and knowing that, and everybody paired up except for Crazy Lady. I mean, if I knew that, I wouldn't have. Because okay, let me back up. I was confused by her reaction. Like, oh no, I'm not picked, I'm going to die. I'm not picked, I'm going to die. And my first thought was, no, you're not, because
Well, you don't know that. They could have easily just killed her off.
Well, and they could have, but my first thought was, well, if they're trying to do what they say and keep this equal, and you're unable to play, that is unfair, and that is not, that's not giving her a chance at all. Like, you just don't get a chance, you're dead. Like that, I did not see that happening. And when they drug her off, I'm like, she's probably gonna be alive after all this is over. Like, I knew it. I was like, one, because she's just that annoying, but but second, I was like, she's probably alive. And then when they showed her in the room, I was like, I
figured that she was also gonna live when she was like freaking out. But again, you can understand from her perspective. Like, I mean, again, how many hundred people have died at this point? You know, they're killing people. There's no surprise here, and it's like, well, you weren't picked. Like, so you can understand, like, from her perspective, her freaking out.
Sure.
And when she was brought back, I'm sure it was like the greatest sigh of relief she could have possibly had. But
and then, like, dude I'd assumed that she was dead, and it was, I don't have to see that crazy lady anymore. It's like, she's gonna be gone. I don't have to worry about her. And then the look on his face after he sees her back in the room, it's like, that's it.
She helped out a lot of people on that glass bridge.
Yeah, she did.
Because that was a bad spot for her to be in. Just the dude refusing to play the game, right? That's another thing about meritocracy. What if you have a dude who's just refusing to play the game where you can't even play it? Like, even like those disruptions in the game itself. All right, very good. All right, Acid, we'll go ahead and go to you. What's one thing you want to talk about?
Okay, well, this show better have a second season. Otherwise, my next point is very confusing. So, the cop, undercover
this is
man.
My number one. This is my number one.
False hope. I get false hope. That's fine. Or false closure, whatever you want to call it. Like, when when you realize that he's not going to make it and the text didn't go through, I mean, it's like, okay, well, this opens it up for, maybe season 2 or whatever they're going to do with it. But if not, I'm like, come on, man, you got to give me some closure. You can't just keep this going, and not tell us either more, like, again, more with the VIPs or more with I need more information. It just wouldn't make sense. I just think it's phenomenal how he was able to infiltrate the PlayStation people without being caught earlier on. They had scanner guns and they were tagging people. I'm like, dude, there's no way they didn't know. Like, I don't know. And that's just kind of my. I don't know. I
You
guess
know
I
what?
didn't agree with his story. I
I
think they could
I
have
had
gone
some
different directions.
flaws with it too, because there was a lot of times like they were like, "Oh, you didn't show up to this and this and that," and I was like, "See, there's too many people realizing things." But then I give them credit, because when I was getting angry with the fact that like when they were going down the thing and he's like, "Don't touch that, it's a bomb," and like I'm like, the guy's done this 100 times. Why is he like okay explaining it to him this
Right?
time?
You know,
I was like, that
you
makes no
should
sense.
know this.
But then when they got down, then it was very quick discovered, like he is aware. He knows it's not you, or
Yeah.
not who it's supposed to be. Now, was it the smartest way to deal with it? Of course not. I would say the one-on-one confrontation with somebody is probably not the best in a situation like that. However, at least they acknowledged that his cover did get blown and things
And
like
it
that.
was his brother.
Yeah.
I was like, he's been looking for his brother, and this was the dumbest way to reveal that you found your brother in this situation. You know, like, oh, I'm gone. I've heard about this thing, and I'm going after to find my brother to see if he's dead or alive. And and all of a sudden, you know, Doctor Doom is your brother. You know,
Yeah.
I mean, it's like, really, come on. I mean, you even found the picture of him. You know, that he was a contestant.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, if I was a contestant on a Squid Game and I won, that's the last place I would be. I would definitely not come back as Doctor Doom and try to manage the whole thing. It's not going to happen. I'll be on the other island across the sea, you know, enjoying my Mai Tai and hour-long massages every 2 hours. You know, it'd be great. So.
Well, Lindsay, I know you have, as they say in the business, a hard out, and you got to get out of here soon. So we'll go ahead. Let's go ahead and go to you, and let's give you your final word on Squid Game.
I think my last thing is a frustration that is, I don't know if it's just because I've watched too much media. You know, at some point you've watched enough stuff that you see things start happening way before they actually do, of how obvious it was, at least for me, that the old man had some weird shit going on with him.
Oh, really?
Like,
yeah. I had no idea. I did not see that coming.
Because I guess it was just my paranoia, maybe even for like the very first game with the red light, green light, and how unnaturally happy he was, and how quickly he just picked up and just like went with like no question of like, he knew something. It's like, for me, I knew something was going on. I think, like, initially I thought maybe it might be something kind of like the organ donor or organ stealing, I guess, a doctor. But just seeing how he acted from the dementia-ridden, I need to count the people to keep my brain working, when we first see him, to him just like laughing and smiling and like running past the dead bodies without like thinking twice. It was so obvious. And then I still don't know what to think about the kind of Island of Dr. Moreau reveal for him, of like, we do this so that we can see if there's goodness in people, so we just like pit them against each other to kill each other over and over and over again. It felt almost heavy-handed in some ways, like the explanation that they gave for a show that could be as nuanced as it was for the rest of the runtime. So it felt like there was something missing. Maybe it'll be in a season 2. Maybe they will try to like explain it a little bit more. That is the one episode that I watched only in dub and not in sub. So maybe there's even something in sub that I missed. I will admit that, but it just felt so heavy-handed at that point.
Yeah, the way I read that at the very end is I read it as bullshit. Like, I read it as this old man's bullshit. So that's kind of how I interpret it, as like, it's the perfect representation of someone attempting to make something fair, but it's clearly not fair. And like, for him to think that he's somehow doing something good for society by making it a game, and how the game itself is just as bad as sort of like the supposed real world, right? So that's kind of how I read it, but I could definitely see.
I chalked it to writer's block. I just think they didn't know what they were doing at the end.
You didn't know what they were going to do?
No, they didn't know.
It did feel kind of like they were just adding it for the sake of like, surprise twist, gotcha. Yeah, did we get you? No, we got you. Okay.
They could have, instead of putting that, however long that was, they could have given us VIP background information instead.
See, I'm gonna like argue with you on that point. I don't want any more information on the VIP. I think they are meant to be this monolithic, unlikable group that you give more like showtime to, and you try to make them human somehow, and it detracts from what they're supposed to be to the larger story. Because if all of a sudden you understand why they're doing it, and you're like, okay, I could see why, like how I could do that too, then it takes away from some of the like hard hitting points that it's trying to make through the rest of the series.
All right. Well, I kind of agree with that.
I like to know all my information. I have to know everything. I have to know it all before I can enjoy it fully.
I guarantee you there's obviously going to be a season 2 and probably a season 3 and 4 as well.
As well as
milk this so bad.
Oh, absolutely. Normally when I see a show on Netflix go to number 1, it's like it's there for a day, maybe 3 days. It's been number 1 for like 3 weeks here in Canada. Yeah. So like, it's they're going to be.
And then you'll get the American version of it in about a year or 2 from now. It'll be
and it'll be 10 times as bad.
It'll be called the Octopus Game, and it'll be,
it'll be less obvious. Hopscotch of death. Something like that.
So am I the only one? Maybe I'm the only one that has this opinion, but I kind of wanted this to be a one shot. Like I wanted this to be like a one shot thing, even with the ambiguous ending. Like if you wanted to where he turns around and goes back, like even ending with that, I think is fine. And any sort of, in my opinion, any sort of second season, I think has a risk of diminishing the powerfulness of the show. Lindsay, I think you agree with that.
Yeah, I honestly think it's best as a one shot or one season show. I think that it was honestly the way it was originally written, even of intending this to be the only season. However, we know how money works in the film industry, and now that it's made so much money, even if the showrunner and the writers don't come back, they're going to make another one, which is the unfortunate truth. But I do think just with how it was written and the powerfulness of the reveals that do happen, you're not going to get that with the second season. It's going to turn into like action movie. Let's go fight the bad guys and break down the games. You're not going to get the like slow burn kind of reveals and twists. You might get 1 or 2, but not a whole season's worth. So
you can definitely see they left enough open-ended storylines where they were like, hey, maybe season 2, like, we'll see. And it's exactly what you just said, Lindsay. At the end of the day, they look at their bank accounts, they go, oh, look at that extra 0 that just got added on. Like, hey, who's got season 2? Like, I guarantee someone is already writing at least something for it. Like, I guarantee it.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with that. But yeah. All right, Lindsay, I know you have to go. If you have to go or hang around as much as you can, but
yeah. Sorry for dipping out. It's been fun talking to all of y'all, but I still got work in the morning.
Do I need to go to the 3-man show? Hang on.
Yeah, I got.
Don't go yet, so I can make it look really cool after you.
It'll be a great transition.
Yeah. While Acid's doing that, I'll go ahead and do my number 1.
There's a placeholder now.
So my number 1 is very similar to Acid's. I kind of wanted to extend what he was talking about with the cop storyline. I feel like the cop storyline left us with an underdeveloped conclusion. Like it's to the point. Once again, I'm okay with ambiguousness in TV shows, but you set up this whole storyline where he infiltrates the actual the game. He's getting all this information, and at the end, he just ends up getting shot and dies, and that's it. That's just going to be the end of his story. And the fact that he's the brother of the game master, you're like, we're really not going to address this. We're not going to talk about what this means. We're not going to talk about why this guy was willing to kill his own brother to keep the game going. Like, I just felt like there were some loose ends that could have been explained or sort of addressed rather than doing the whole twist ending at the end, which I agree with you, Bloomer, I do feel like it was kind of like M. Night Shyamalan. Oh, here you go.
Yeah.
He was dead the whole time.
Yeah,
like,
you didn't expect this, did ya? Huh? Did ya? Like,
yeah,
no,
and I do feel like the whole cop story, like it was far more interesting and far more intricate to the story to just leave on this weird ending with no real. You didn't tie anything up at all, and I felt like that
so
was definitely.
This is just me not remembering well. So he gets obviously we've talked spoilers, so it's fine. He gets shot, falls off the cliff, right? Is that like, and then he splashes in the water? Is he like, that's what we saw as dead? We didn't see like a shark rip him in two or anything like that? Because
so that's a very good point. And
because he should be dead. Obviously, he should be dead. Yeah. But it's also, it's television, right? So I mean, yeah. Next thing we know, he comes back with a peg leg and he's like, "Arr, I fought a shark and now I'm a pirate." But here's now the cops are with me, but they don't trust me because I only have one leg. And like, you know what I mean? Like it's gonna. Yeah. I worry.
What was that sort of like a cliffhanger for season 2? Then that makes me not like it at all. Right?
Yeah. They should have just had closure and have been done with it.
Yeah, I feel like though they really wanted to make sure. So things like, why is his brother now like that head, whatever his role was, but like the head in charge on the ground person? Like there's stuff like that. Bringing now that our main character or the hero of the story, he got out and he got all that money. Did he get himself out of trouble? Is he going to be really any better? Like we heard he hadn't touched the money. But he must have touched it because, he must have at the very least paid off the loan sharks and stuff. Otherwise, he'd still be getting hunted down by them. So,
well, he did touch the money at the end because he gave it to his friend's mother.
Yeah, and I know that he gave at least a certain amount to her. Who knows how much? But they said specifically in the show, though, at one point, like the bank got in touch with him and was like, "Hey, we noticed you haven't touched your money."
Right.
And we're like, well, again, we know he touched it. We even saw him take out like the 10 whatever, like I know it's like 10 cents Canadian or whatever, but like yeah. I mean we saw him touch the money. So I mean I just don't know where, but I'm just saying like we know we're gonna see like I think now like stage 2, him going back and what is his role now and does he get treated now that he's like alumni, and is he now gonna wear like a circle on his face and wear the mask? And if he comes back 3 years in a row and gets, employee of the month, he gets promoted to a triangle. Like, I don't know. I think that's where the second season's going to lay more in though, is understanding what the actual Squid Games are, how they work, who's running it, more like the VIP talk we were talking about, Acid, like just all of that, I think is where season 2 is going.
And I would love to see that. Yeah.
All right. Well, very good. That was my final one. So, Bloomer, we'll go ahead and get your final thing that you want to talk about with Squid Game.
Oh my goodness! I feel like, truthfully, we've throughout kind of touched on everything I was going to talk about today. However, I did have one last thought on all of that, and what was it? It was. Now I should have written something down. That would have been way smarter. We talked to the subs. We talked about that. It was. Oh man, I don't even remember. So let's go on a different tangent here as well. So we talked a little bit about the glass game before, and I gotta say that one I loved it, but I hated that one. It was because it didn't make sense with the rest of the Squid Games, because every other one, again, they were based on kids games. That one wasn't. It's also the first one where the actual game master, like you talked about, the turn off the lights. That's the first time the game master changed the rules midway through, or well, at the end, but midway through, which is, again, that was totally against the whole point of it. So there was just like a few things like that where I was just like, as much as I thought it was cool and like graphically it looked phenomenal, like at the end when all the glass is blowing up and like it looked cool. It was a great concept, but I found the actual game itself, I was like, you couldn't think of like a 6th game? Or was it just purely for the cinematography of that?
And another thing that I think is worth bringing up is, let's say, like realistically, practically speaking, you design that as being one of the games. You're really overlooking the idea that everyone ends up dying, and then what?
Yeah.
Like, what if everyone, you get, well, there's like 10 people there or whatever, 16 people. What if everyone dies? Then like, what are you going to do then? Then you don't have any more of the game left. Yeah. So it's just really, the actual logic of the game didn't really make a lot of sense. And the fact that so many people did end up surviving to the very end had everything to do with the way it was just written.
Right? Yeah, but even like, I mean, I forget if it was yourself, Anthony, or if it was Acid, but I think it was you that said, why not? Like on the glass, like, why didn't they just jump onto the two sides? Like at the very least, like, let me tell you guys, if I know I'm number one now and I'm the first one going, the first thing I'm doing, I'm deciding in my strategy, am I doing like a split leg trying to land on the two sides and balance and like hold on to anything if the glass does even break? Yeah. Or I'm going to full commit to grabbing one side and I'm grabbing the railing. I don't care. I cut my arm on some glass. Whoop-de-doo. I'm holding on to that thing like with a death grip, because otherwise I'm going to fall right through the center of the glass. And hey, look how far of a fall that is. I'm probably dead. I'd rather have to like crawl, get to the next glass, crawl on top of it, take a little breather, go, you know what I mean? Like there were other ways to do it. And if your life was on the line, literal, you knew I am going to die if I don't do this, you're going to be thinking outside the box a little.
Yeah, 100% agree with that. All right, Bloomer. So let's go ahead and move on to Acid. What's your final one?
All right, so my final one, and what I think is at least the most interesting part about this whole movie. I mean, the games are great. The whole show was great. But what I found the most intriguing was the process of recruiting these people with the little flip the thing game and then slapping them and just like that, especially seeing him doing it at the beginning and then watching him watch the other guy through the subway window of the guy doing it to somebody else and just seeing those parallels and just how far will you go before you stop getting slapped, and none of them ever did until they won the game. And I don't know. I can't speak from experience, and I can't say that I would do one way or the other. But if given the same scenario, would you let just somebody keep slapping you, for however much money that was, like $1,000 or 100 cent or whatever it was, 101, I don't know. Like,
Acid, if for $1,000 you could slap me twice, buddy. I want you to know that right now.
Okay.
Like, if you told me right now, Bloomer, I'm going to slap you twice, they're going to be good slaps. Watch out. But every time you let me slap you twice, I'm going to give you $1,000. Yep. Like, your boy Bloomer's going to figure out how many slaps he can take before he drops. Yep. Because that's $1,000 each. Even $100, I'd probably be like, all right, let's see. Like, let's brace for the first one. Okay, yeah, I can. That was worth $50.
But the psychological aspect of that game itself, and it happened the first time with the main guy, is he did it so many times. He lost so many times, and at the point where he finally won, the only thing he could think about in that moment was slapping that other guy. Like he was ready to, it's my turn. Boom. And he was going to slap me and went, nope, here's the money. And he was like, oh yeah, there was money involved, wasn't there? And and then he took the money and the card, and the rest is history. I found that very intriguing.
Yeah, it kind of sort of shows how they're just so used to being abused. Like they're just so used to society just inflicting punishment on them, and they're just, oh yeah, that's right. There's a point to this whole thing, right? Which is definitely a good point. Well, there you go. That was our review of the Squid Game. We talked about all kinds of great things, the games. We talked about meritocracy and all that kind of stuff. All right, so Acid, let's go ahead and skip trivia because this episode was pretty long. So we'll go ahead and end the show here. So Bloomer, thank you so much for being on the show. Anything you want to say?
No, as always, guys, I really appreciate the invite. I love getting a chance to sit down and chat with you guys about some of my favorite topics. Squid Games, like I said, I was gonna watch it over like any other show over a week or 2 weeks or whatever. loved it. Sat down, watched it for like 9.5, 10 hours straight.
I know.
So
It's like 2 days. I was like, yep, that was good.
yeah, like so I was super stoked when you reached out and told me, hey, we're talking Squid Games. You interested? So yeah, thanks so much for having me, guys.
Yeah. Next,
Very
we'll do the
good.
second season of The Witcher.
There you go. All right, excellent. All right, so that was our show. Once again, you can check us out on YouTube, like and subscribe and all that kind of stuff. You can also check us out wherever you get your podcasts. You can listen to us in podcast form. For our producer, Acidtrain, for Bloomer and all his guitars, I'm Anthony Nanar. Thank you for listening. Goodbye, everybody.